Good afternoon. Thank you for spending the next half hour with me to discuss literacy landscape in your district as well as in our country. My name is Joanna McCall, and I am an educator, a former reading interventionist whose passion was teaching students to read. Now I am a consultant for Reading Horizons, where I get to share solutions with other educators about how to increase reading achievement in their district. So, I want to talk about today, we want to start with the NAEP scores, which provide us a snapshot of the state of education across the country. We want to discuss several must haves for ensuring we are providing our older students with effective instruction and a possible solution for you to take back to your district to close the gaps in reading for your older learners. And we're going to end with some success stories that we are witnessing today with some of the districts that are applying this solution. So, the results we'll be discussing today are more than just numbers. They represent the collective work of the students, teachers, and entire communities. Some of the trends are encouraging, while others show us that there's significant areas that we need to improve. So, our goal today is not just to examine the data, but to think critically about what these trends mean for us as educators and how we can use this information to guide our future decisions that we're making for our students. So I know you've all seen the scores and the results, and we know now that there is a greater need than before to really address these gaps that we're seeing with these scores. The decline, we realized, started in 2019. And I think we can all say that we probably thought that the scores coming out in 2022 would be impacted by the pandemic. And we're hopeful that those scores would continue to go up with the 2024 data. However, when it came out, there is that consistent decline that we're seeing. So I want you to just think about, I want to know what your thoughts were. And in the chat, I just want you to drop, were you surprised by these results? Was it what you expected to happen? Did you think it was going to be higher? So just take a second and I'd love to know just what your thoughts are on these results as they came out a couple of weeks ago. So I'm seeing some what I expected to be lower, not surprised, expected. Yeah, expected. Good morning. So I think a lot of you are saying, and it's really what I thought too, that we weren't surprised, but we need more to really affect these students. We've got to be able to have some hope to anchor to, that we can recover from this, that we can keep going and we can get our students back to where they need to be. But thinking about those literacy scores in your district compared to the NAEP outcomes. I'm going to do one more quick poll. So, how do the literacy scores in your district compare to those outcomes over the past few years? Did they align closely with what we're seeing in your district? Um, Consistent, really haven't changed over the much few years, or they've shown some improvement in the recent years. So, and Jeanette, I might get you to share with me like what that looks like, what the results are from that poll. Oh, there it is. Great. So we're seeing that about 55% are saying this is matching what you're seeing in your district. Some have remained consistent, and then some have shown improvement in the recent years. So that's great that you are seeing some improvement for those that are seeing the improvement. But I think most of us are saying this is matching. We're seeing this is matching. But what do we do? How do we address the needs of those students that are beyond that third grade? So I want to talk about first some What do we need for those older students? What are some must-haves that we have to begin implementing to ensure that our students are getting that success they need in reading? Starting with the right type of instruction. Instruction teaching students to read needs to be explicit, systematic, and aligned to the science of reading. We now know how our brains learn to read, and we need to make sure that our students have access to instruction that aligns with it. On a positive note, I think we're seeing a lot of districts within the country using science of reading for their teachers and having teachers going and getting more training on it. So we're seeing some growth in the earlier grades of having that effective instruction there. And I'm thankful about that. But as students get older, it's equally important to continue building on these skills and ensure that the instruction is adapted to their growing cognitive and linguistic abilities. Older learners may not fully have mastered those foundational skills, and they can benefit from more targeted instruction. So, we need to make sure that that instruction aligns with what we know about how the brain learns to read so we can have more equitable outcomes for students at every age, addressing those reading difficulties before they become long term challenges. The second is practice. Using a model like the gradual release of responsibility, where students transition from being dependent on the teacher to becoming more autonomous and independent learners. This approach is really effective with older learners as it helps them take ownership of their learning process. Pacing is key, right? Older students need to stay engaged while they're mastering new content. We know that engagement is the facilitator for learning, and we need those students to be engaged. While we're assessing student needs, teachers have to adjust the speed, going faster or slowing down to meet those needs. As Anna Gillingham quotes, she says, we must go as fast as we can, as slow as we must. So, really ensuring that students that need more are getting it and slowing down to close the gaps for those that are not getting it is imperative. Differing instruction is going to ensure that all learners are supported. We can have scaffolds in place for those learners, and those scaffolds can be removed as they become more independent and gain independence. And lastly, one of the most important is to have opportunities for students to apply what they're learning to actual reading. We say what happens in isolation stays in isolation. So we want to provide our students with an ample opportunities to practice, 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 and having that repetition, repetition, repetition. I recently heard in a podcast that repetition is the mother of instruction. It really resonated with me because I do believe that it is about repetition. When we're looking at students that are struggling, they need lots of repetition, lots of opportunities to practice. So, let me begin with the simple view of reading. And I know many of you have seen this simple view of reading, saying that it's easy to explain how we learn to read. Although Louisa Moat sometimes says it's like teaching rocket science, but it is two components that create that comprehension. So, decoding, recognizing those words on the page, times that language comprehension, really understanding what those words mean is where we gain meaning, where comprehension is. So, comprehension is a product of both. If either of these components is weak, comprehension will suffer. So, knowing that it's a product, if one component is weak, comprehension's not happening. And as an administrator, you've likely encountered situations where a student's poor reading performance is attributed to comprehension. Maybe you have teachers come in and say, this student can't comprehend. So here's a key question to think about. If you ask them, well, if you read it aloud to them, how well do they do? Oh, they can do it if I read it aloud. It's not a comprehension problem. It is one of these two components, and likely it's a decoding issue. As Anita Archer states, there's no comprehension strategy to compensate for the fact they can't read the words on the page. Yet, too often, we respond with giving students more comprehension to practice. So they're struggling with comprehension. Let's give them more and more and more, which just perpetuates the problem and the frustration for students. So really making sure that students can decode, and when they do that, the comprehension will improve naturally. So it is essential that that decoding happens first. The key takeaway is that decoding is the foundational piece, and without it, no amount of comprehension practice is going to solve the problem. So, as educators, administrators, it's important to break this cycle by first ensuring that students have strong decoding skills, then build up their comprehension abilities from there. Next, I want to talk about motivation. If you've worked with older learners, the importance of motivation. If students are not motivated, they're going to not be engaged. So, how do we get them motivated? The National Reading Panel recognizes motivation even above comprehension because of that importance. We know we have to keep our students motivated. We have to give them choice, and they have to have success to stay motivated. This quote really speaks to the power of self belief and its direct connection to achievement, especially in an educational context. Confidence in themselves is key, and it's a pivotal part of that success. When they believe they can succeed, they're more likely to take risk, persist through challenges, and put forth that effort they need. These struggling students are likely to have a low self efficacy. They might not believe in themselves. They may not think they're smart because they are not able to read. We have an ability to change that trajectory for them. How do we do that? We give them quick wins. We drop that perceived difficulty. This is not that hard. And when we give them manageable bites to metabolize and they get that over and over again, they start to gain that self efficacy. Increasing that self efficacy is key. So, really keeping these students motivated is an imperative part of what makes reading successful. So, I want to share with you the method of instruction that I actually used in my classroom and now working for Reading Horizons. This is a snapshot of our method. It is Orton Gillingham based, created by an educator over 40 years ago. It is explicit, systematic, sequential, and multimodal, meaning it's going to meet the needs of all of your students, and those with dyslexia especially need that multimodal engagement piece. That explicit instruction in our manuals, it's scripted. Teachers will know this is what I say, this is what the student's response is supposed to be, and will align with what the research tells us about how our brain learns to read. You see that we go from simple to complex. A lot of our students that are older are drowning in these multisyllabic words. They're here and they don't have the background to read them. So, how do we teach a student to get to here as quickly as we can, ensuring that they have this all the basic skills before? You see that there is a unique marking system. There are 9 marks, and those marks really just I think of them more as like training wheels on a bicycle when they're learning to decode and learning the patterns, because it's all about teaching the patterns to the English language, that those markings really ensure that they are getting, a strategy to figure out, what does this word mean? How do I read this word? And how do I break this word in syllable location? So every mark is intentional, and it affects pronunciation or syllable location. It receives a mark. So, but what makes this unique is the simplicity in which these skills are taught. It is all about making it simple for these students. Students are able to make gains quickly, which, going back to that previous slide, is going to increase their motivation and lead to positive reading outcomes. The process used to instruct this method is designed to increase student engagement, which we know is that facilitator of learning. So I want to go into and just highlight what I call the backbone of our method, with starting with our 5 phonetic skills. There is a bookmark that is kind of blurry, that I'm going to have dropped in the chat for you, so you can look at this as I go through these patterns. Again, we're going back to teaching patterns, and it's the simplistic way in which we teach these patterns that's going to make it effective for the students. We start with short vowel patterns. We teach our students to go under the word and look at what follows the vowel, not what precedes the vowel, but what follows the vowel, because it's what follows that determines is the vowel long or short. So this is our phonetic skill 1. And students have heard closed syllable, open syllable. Sometimes that doesn't resonate with students because it's more abstract. Let's give them something concrete. Phonetic skill 1. When we go under the word and we look, we have one unit, the consonant T, one sound following this vowel. When there's one consonant sound following the vowel, it's going to prove the vowel is short. Students can count. 1, the vowel is short. Phonetic skill 2, very similar to 1. This time when we go under the word, we have 2 consonant sounds following the vowel, which also proves the vowel is short. We call these guardians. So when we have consonant sounds that follow the vowel, they're guardians. And that is only with our short vowels. Students are able to count 1, 2. The vowel is short. We're talking about single syllable words now, but this will also apply when we get to multisyllabic words. Phonetic skill 3, nothing follows the vowel. It stands alone, so the vowel is long. Not a lot of words in our English language follow this. You can probably think of them and name them off the top of your head. However, when we get to multisyllabic words, a third of our syllables follow this simple pattern. When we have instructed our students on phonetic skill 1, 2, and 3, that encompasses about 75% of all the syllables in the English language. So just those 3 are really going to open doors for students because they're going to start being able to decode more rapidly. We finish with phonetic skill 4 and 5. 4 is just where we have the E on the end of that single syllable word, proving the previous vowel is long. And the last one is our phonetic skill 5, where we have 2 adjacent vowels. We say when 2 vowels are side by side, the second vowel is silent, the previous vowel is long. And we teach all 9 of the adjacent vowel patterns when we teach this skill. When we're able to do this, we're taking a load off of our working memory. We want to maximize that those executive functions. Our goal is to get this to our long-term memory because once it's in your long-term memory, you cannot lose it. And sometimes students are hearing too much. There's so much going on in their working memory that it doesn't stay and it doesn't stick. But when we're practicing these skills and we're doing the same pattern again and again and again, it becomes automatic and then does end up in our long-term storage. So just those 5 phonetic skills, simple yet powerful because we're giving students really something easy to identify how to read single syllable words. And it builds, and we're going to continue to use these when we get to multisyllabic words. Before I go, I want you to just think to yourself, think of a student, maybe a 4th grade student. If you were to go pull that 4th grade student out and just choose one pattern, maybe it's phonetic skill 2, meaning there's going to be 2 consonant sounds following that vowel. How confident would you be after me just showing you this in 60 seconds to instruct one of your students on this pattern? Maybe you have a word like soft, lamp, lift. I'm just thinking of words that follow that pattern, and the students see it's a pattern, it's the same, it's a pattern, it's the same. How confident would you be? Like on a scale of 1 to 5, and you can drop it in the chat if you want to. 1, no way, I could not do that. Or 5, oh, I could 100% do this effectively right now. 4, I'm pretty close to being there. Just to kind of really say, like, this is simple. We have to give these students something that's simple and easy. Great. I'm seeing lots of a 4.8, 5s, 4s, and 5s. Yeah. So I showed you that in 60 seconds, but imagine a 30-minute lesson for your students and how you're going to develop that automaticity with those skills when they have that repetition, 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 because remember, repetition is the mother of instruction. Let me show you next how these build to multisyllabic words. And this is probably the easiest, most simplistic way I've ever seen or taught where these words break in syllabication. So we teach our students to go under the word. Here we have a 2-syllable word. So where does it break in syllabication? Decoding skill 1, again, the simplistic 1. we go and we look between the vowels and we ask this question, how many units are between those vowels? It's just this constant T, 1 unit. Decoding skill 1. When there's 1 unit, we explicitly teach, it moves on with the next syllable. So here's our break. Then we apply those 5 phonetic skills. Think in your head, if you've got the bookmark, which skill would this be? This is 3, nothing follows the vowel. Remember, a third of syllables follow that. Then we go to the next syllable, applying those phonetic skills. There's one guardian, the vowel is short. It's going to prove this word for them. Then they're accurately decoding the word and can read it. Motel. Simple to say that when there's 1 unit between the vowels, it moves on. With decoding skill 2, again, it's about a number. We go under the word and we mark. We know we have a 2-syllable word. We look between. Here we have 2 units between the vowels. So when where 1 would move on, 2 are going to split. Now we apply those 5 phonetic skills. If you have your bookmark, phonetic skill 1, because that 1 guardian consonant will prove the vowel is short, and the second syllable follows that same pattern of phonetic skill 1. Simply to explain, the students can understand it, and then they can decode words of any length. They become autonomous when we can give them and teach them these skills in a way that allows them to have that success. So decoding skill 2 is really just that. When 2 units follow a vowel, they split between those vowels. Simple. Let me talk about how it's taught. It is taught 2 different ways. Direct instruction is the most critical piece of instruction. We know we want the teachers there in front of the students. Teachers are giving the students what they need through instruction. You can see students are using whiteboards and markers to practice these skills, not worksheet heavy, because really, how engaging is a worksheet? So students are using markers. They're going through the skills, they're getting feedback, and then they're having an opportunity to apply those skills. So think back to those must-haves. They have to apply what they're learning and get it out of isolation. So we're going to apply many different ways. We're going to read at the word level, at the sentence level, with decodable passages that are 90% decodable and 80% decodable. So if you think back to that slide on motivation, if we're giving them decodable passages to increase their self-efficacy, because they're going to be able to read that text and then focus on comprehension, you're dropping that perceived difficulty for them. You're also working on fluency, accuracy, automaticity, and ultimately comprehension. We also have passages that are not decodable, but are nonfiction passages that are Lexile based. And we have software track that will mirror the instruction that they're getting. So multiple opportunities to practice. And this combination ensures that students are not only learning the phonics rules, but being able to apply them in meaningful, real world context and promoting really greater retention and that automaticity. So I want you to think about your district and what this will look like, because this is the flexibility piece. With the Elevate Express track, we can cover these skills in as little as a semester. If your teachers, or if you have time to have this done 5 days a week, so 3 days of that direct instruction with a teacher using manuals that are scripted, that explicit instruction, and 2 days to apply those skills. So if you don't have that time, maybe you don't have a reading interventionist at your school, maybe it's someone else that does it. It could take longer than 12 weeks. You might be able to do it in less if you have more time. Each lesson is about 30 minutes. And so you'll see some of the groups that we're seeing using this track really for intervention for those students that have just fallen through the cracks. Those students that have accuracy with alphabetic principle. They can read CVC words, but they just are struggling with those multisyllabic words, and we need to get them there more quickly. This is a large group that's seeing it, but we're also seeing districts using this for extended learning. So after school tutoring, summer learning, they can follow this track. MLLs, We're seeing some of your, like I know with my state that we use the WIDA access. So some of our students that are not level ones and twos, but some of those threes and fours that really just need to close the gaps. And in special education, we're seeing some populations, those students with intellectual disabilities might need a slower track, but with some of our students that are SLD, this is a great opportunity for students to really close the gaps for them, because a lot of times it's that discrepancy with that achievement and their IQ. So 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week is optimal. So that's what we recommend. But think about your district. What would it look like? How would that work for your district? So let's continue with. Earlier, I talked about the gradual release of responsibility being something that needs to happen. So what does that look like in a 30-minute lesson? It begins with a review, and then it goes to instruction. This is where teachers have a scripted manual. We have a manual that just follows this track. Teachers are able to know what to say, what to write, and what the student's response will be. The meat of the lesson is the dictation piece. This is where students are actively engaged. They hear it, they say it, they write it, they read it. They do it again and again and again, practicing those patterns, really breaking those patterns, followed by initially applying and reading words at the word level and sentence level, and then extending it to that transfer that we talked about earlier, to giving multiple opportunities to apply. So this is that instructional design that we use, and it is that gradual release of responsibility. With the express track sequence, it begins with an optional phonics screener that is specific to our method. This screener can be used to determine where are those gaps with students, what are the skills that they don't have proficiency with that we need to address, and can be used, or again, you may use data that you already have. If you already know those students that are on the bubble that you need to address that instruction with, this could just be an added piece. We've taken our first two chapters, the alphabetic principle and blends and digraphs, and combined them into mini lessons. So now that alphabetic principle is covered in one lesson. And then we have one lesson that covers L blends, one that covers R, one that covers S. So we have 6 mini lessons. And then on lesson 7, they're at phonetic skill 1, where that one Guardian proves the vowel is short. So we're getting them there to that point as quickly as we can, getting them to those decoding skills more quickly. So with this track, we have 29 full core skill lessons in addition to those 6 mini lessons. We want to make sure that students have proficiency with these skills before moving to the next lesson, but we have condensed it so that we can do this in less time and really meet the needs of those students. The support materials that we have to follow with are, like we talked about, getting students those multiple opportunities to practice, or these transfer cards, word level, sentence level, decodable passages that I talked about earlier, where these decodable passages are both 90 and 80% decodable, focusing on really building their self-efficacy, fluency, accuracy, and automaticity. Those reading library passages that are Lexile based, and students actually take a reading library assessment to determine where they are in the Lexile, and augmented with that student software. The software has a track that mirrors those 29 full lessons and 6 mini lessons. One other piece that we want to make sure that we address is that with older learners, the teachers often might not have as much time or as much background to know what do I use in small groups. So we're going to be able to provide them with a sequence that will give them, here is the lesson that you're going to teach, and here are the resources that we've embedded for you in hyperlinks. So all you have to do is click on it. So giving them that turnkey, using those whole class transfer cards to practice, to review with, giving data tracking sheets, because a lot of these students we are tracking and they're having data meetings about the students monthly. And you're going to have multiple data points with this track to look at that growth, as well as hyperlinking those decodable passages. Those passages can be printed out. We also have those passages in a book. But the intent behind this was to make sure teachers had everything they needed at their fingertips. I'm going to wrap up with student outcomes. This data is from a district that piloted this express track, and this intervention teacher found me and said, in Alabama, which is where I live, we use the ACAP for a state assessment. And she said all of her kids that she was working with in intervention had scored a level 1 or 2 the last year, which is not proficient. Fast forward to 2024, after using this scope and sequence of the express track, she had 69% of her students that were proficient. 69%, that's huge. They scored a level 4. We also recently heard from a group that was using it with their SPED students, and they began implementation in September. And by January, some of their students had already seen 2 years growth on the assessment that they were using. So we're seeing that data grow, we're seeing it move, and we're really affecting those students. So I want to see this happen in other districts, in your district as well. I'd love to put your district here on this data. So I want to stop with really thinking about answering the poll question. And if you are watching this as a recording and you want to know more, please feel free to email us at this address. So just ending with, if you'd like to know more, please check yes and no if not, but I appreciate you spending your last half hour with me and wish you the best. Thank you so much.
And Joanna, we have 1 or 2 questions. I wonder if we could just answer them real quick.
Sure.
One of them is if you already have Elevate, is this available for?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you already have Elevate in your district, it's as simple as getting in touch with us and we can give you that scope and sequence. The scope and sequence is also on the help desk and you're ready to go. You can follow along with the scope and sequence in the manuals that you have. Or you could also purchase the manual if you wanted just the express track manual that has the 6 mini lessons and those lessons combined in one as an addition to what you already have. So yes, you're set and ready to go with just a couple more pieces.
Okay, and I also put the Express Track sample lesson in the chat. So
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you for sharing that. So yes, click on that sample lesson so you can see what a lesson looks like. And then there's a decodable passage in there that goes along with that lesson. So you can also get a look at what those 2 passages will look like. I appreciate you sharing those, Jeanette.
Yeah, and then quickly, the last question was just, do we do a webinar certificate after this? If you, you're going to get an email probably tomorrow with all of the follow-up resources. So we'll include the bookmark, the lesson, and if you just reply to that email and just say you would like a certificate of participation, we'll be happy to send that to you. So I think we're all set. Thanks everybody for your engagement, and Joanna, thanks for a great session.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.